Okay, I guess we'll go ahead and get started. First off, thank you all so much for coming. This is our second Empower Hour of the semester, and we're excited to have y'all here. We can't wait for more. I'm excited to have our speaker, Maggie, and Sydney from our alumni board. She's with the senior program or the student program committee, and I encourage everyone to be engaged and to have their camera on for our speaker. So Sydney, if you want to take it off.
Hi, y'all. I'm Sydney. Yeah, as Priscilla mentioned, I'm on the alumni board for KS Welly. So I'm going to introduce our speaker today, Maggie. So Maggie is a corporate and privacy attorney who runs a virtual law firm providing legal advice to startups and social ventures. In addition to running her own business, Maggie has worked in a variety of roles as an employee and currently serves as an in-house counsel to a healthcare nonprofit in Austin. She's a graduate of Princeton, Texas Law, and the LBJ School of Public Affairs. She's on the alumni board with me for KSLE, where she's the chair of the Student Programming Committee. Maggie recently returned from maternity leave after giving birth to a beautiful baby boy, Soren Alexander. She is passionate about making the world a friendlier place for moms and their kids and creating a culture where everyone can not just survive, but thrive. So with that, Maggie, you can take it away.
Cool. Thanks so much, Sydney, and thank you all for being here on a Monday evening. I know Mondays are tough. In fact, before everyone joined, Catherine and Priscilla and Sydney and I were talking about how today feels like a Thursday somehow, even though it's only Monday, which seems to be the story of my life. I feel like every Monday just kind of is that way. But so yeah, a couple of things before I jump in. Feel free to chime in at any point. Like, I really see this as more of a discussion than a lecture. Nobody's an expert on the topic that I'm going to be talking about today. It's kind of fluffier and more just about your personal experience. So please feel free to chime in at any time. Turn on your video camera if you feel comfortable, just to make it more personal. And then also, if you're familiar with using like the thumbs up and everything on Zoom, I'm going to be like asking questions a lot that are sort of like poll like, and it's helpful if y'all can like respond with a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Or I guess I don't know if there is a thumbs down, but definitely a thumbs up. Yeah, I guess that's all. So let me go ahead and share my screen. I'm actually going to be talking about, I think the title that I'd put out there was advocating for yourself in large organizations. As I was working on what I wanted to talk about, it sort of morphed into more like bringing an entrepreneurial mindset to your work at a large organization. So still related, but slightly different title. So let me go ahead and share. This thing. Okay. So I can see my screen and I can see you all. Catherine, did you want to like fiddle with something with the video or with the display? Oh, I see that you have spotlighted my video for everyone. Okay, great. So yeah, so my presentation, I'm calling it the 9-to-5 entrepreneur. By no means do I mean an entrepreneur can actually work a 9-to-5 day, because any entrepreneur will tell you they're basically at work all the time. But in terms of working a 9-to-5 job, if such jobs really exist anymore, and bringing an entrepreneurial mindset to those positions. I want to start with just sort of one of those sort of polling questions. How many of you are interested in entrepreneurship as a concept? And interested in starting a company?
How many of you are interested in entrepreneurship?
I see a couple of thumbs up. I would think that you're interested in entrepreneurship if you're at a KSL.
I'm glad they can't see me. Oh, there's definitely. Well, there's like no one on this. That's so weird. Oh wait. Well, yes,
here's
there's
someone.
no one on this.
Hey, Catherine and Massey, it sounds like you're off mute.
Oh, they're talking to me. Shoot.
Oh yeah, is that who it is? Okay. Okay, cool. Yeah. Well, how many of you have sort of immediate plans to start your own company or have already started your own company? Okay. Yeah, not many. So a couple, I see a couple. Sydney, I know, is one. And yeah, a couple. So it's very, very common for people to work at other places before they start their own company, sometimes while they're starting their own company. A lot of my clients are actually often still working another job while spinning up their startup. And I guess what I would posit to you is that there are a lot of things and skills that you're going to need to run your own company that you can actually cultivate in your job, your 9 to 5, 8 to 6, job. In fact, Jan Ryan, who teaches an entrepreneurship course at UT, many of you are probably very familiar with her. She spent many years working for companies and calling herself an entrepreneur, like really developing new systems and sort of products for people at her own company or at the company that she worked for. So that's kind of where we're going with this talk. One of the things I'm going to be talking about is like the concept of choosing to work for yourself, even when you're also working for someone else, and what that looks like. I'm going to go through we're going to talk about some habits that founders often have that can be useful when you're working at a big company, talking about creating something of your own. So you have a feeling of ownership and motivation when you're working at a big company. And then very briefly at the end, we'll touch a bit on sort of lifestyle and boundaries, and what that means for this conversation. Yeah, a little bit about me: wife, mom, attorney, and business owner. I think of them in that order. I just had my son, Soren. I also have a daughter named Scarlett. And then my husband, Alex, and I actually co-run our law firm together. I also work as associate general counsel at a healthcare nonprofit, where I feel that I put a lot of the concepts we're going to be talking about to kind of in practice, because I do sort of wear both the, owning a business, trying to develop clients, grow the business, find new opportunities. I wear that hat. And then I also wear the hat of having kind of internal clients, right? Of someone who I report to in departments that are always coming to me with questions. And oftentimes it's a very, very similar role, despite the fact that how it looks on paper is quite different. Couple of pictures here. You probably recognize all of these people. Very, very pixelated photo of Mark Cuban on the left. The guy in the middle is Tim Ferriss. He wrote the really famous 4-Hour Work Week. And then Kendra Scott, obviously had to throw her in here if I'm going to be talking about entrepreneurs at a KS Welly event. But I throw them up here because I think we're living in a society right now where entrepreneurs, founders, they're almost cultural icons, right? Like it's almost like they're the superstars of our generation. And I think that, even when we're looking at these pictures and thinking about these people, it's very common to think about sort of a collection of traits or characteristics that we associate with those with founders, with entrepreneurs. Can people kind of throw out some characteristics that come to mind when you think of someone like Kendra Scott or Mark Cuban? What kinds of things do you associate with those people? And feel free to just unmute and shout it out.
Creative.
Creative is a really good one. Anything else? What makes someone a successful founder?
Definitely passionate. You have to be passionate about what you're doing, to put all the work in.
What
I see fearless.
Fearless. Oh, I like that one. Yeah, I doubt they're fearless, but they're courageous, right? They do stuff in the face of fear. Yeah, anything else?
Recognizing opportunities.
Yeah, being proactive, sort of spotting opportunities where other people, being actively looking for opportunities, right, is another way of thinking about that, as opposed to being reactive and just sort of responding to fires. That's something I talk with clients a lot about, because a lot of people don't call the lawyer, right, until something has gone really wrong, as opposed to trying to get ahead of things and avoid the problems to begin with. Any other thoughts before we move on to the next slide? Persistence, yeah, because it's not all fun and games, right? Trying to build a business up from scratch, definitely. So these are all really good answers. I just put a couple of my own on here. Passion, top of the list. Also, this idea of working smart, this is very much a Tim Ferriss idea, which if any of you have read any of his work, like you'll recognize a lot of these concepts. A lot of the things he talks about are sort of pervasive in kind of entrepreneurial culture now anyway. So I'm going to be talking about that a little bit. And networking as second nature is the third thing I want to talk about. Nobody has a successful business without the right people being involved. And I think that's one thing that for me, at least when I transitioned from being a student to being in the workforce, that was a steep learning curve, because when you're a student, you know, it's about, you know, getting the right grade, putting the right answer down on your test, like doing your homework, doing your projects. But in the workforce, when it comes to your career, like networking is, I don't know, I almost think it's at least as important as like competence at the job that you're doing, as, you know, having the right people in your court. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit too. I forget if I'm going to talk about that here or here. Let's talk about passion first. So I know somebody had mentioned passion when we were going through and like talking about when people were just throwing out characteristics. One point that I really want to make is that, you know, I think all of us have this sense that like you have to be really passionate in order to, you know, persist at something. I know someone else mentioned persistence. You have to be really passionate. I think passion will often translate into quality, right? Like if you're really passionate about something, you're going to work hard at it. You're going to really achieve a higher threshold of quality. However, what's really, really important to remember that passion is not the same as fun. Right. So an entrepreneur, a founder, anyone who's working hard at something, it's a slog, right? Like there's all kinds of tedious stuff you have to do. Like when startup clients come to me, like they're dealing with legal issues. That's not fun. That's not what they're passionate about, but they kind of have to do it anyway, right? And so in the face of that sort of day-to-day tedium that kind of any job or any endeavor really is going to involve, it's important, I think, to be thinking about ways to kind of cultivate and maintain that sense of passion. For me, like some of the things that I wrote down that like kind of help with that are, you know, viewing things as learning opportunities. Like, how am I going to use this thing that just happened to me, or this thing that I just learned, you know, in the future? Motivation, like thinking about what actually motivates you as a person and being honest about that, right? Like some people are motivated by praise, right? Some people are motivated by feedback. Some people are motivated by money. I think probably all of us are motivated by all of these things to some extent, but you're going to have some things that motivate you more than others. And like knowing what that is, once you know what that is for you, you should like, don't worry too much about what it is, but like, capitalize on that, like just lean into it, because that's how you're going to get your best performance out of yourself. How many of you so one thing that I like to think about when I'm thinking about passion and staying diligent in the face of a lot of tedium is I think about being an athlete, right? Like if you're training for something, I remember when I used to play tennis pretty competitively, and like you'd have to just repeat the same stroke over and over again, right? You're just hitting a forehand, then you're hitting another forehand, and you're just doing the same exact stroke in order to get perfection, right? Or as close to perfection as you're going to get. So being an athlete involves a lot of tedium. Who here has like played competitive sports? No, Julie is like, no, not at all. Somebody said yes, but I can't read their name. Cynthia was an athlete, or is an athlete, and I guess it was just Cynthia. Oh, and Mallory. Mallory, can you chime in and share with us how you stay motivated as an athlete when you have all of those practices and, you know, boring things that you've got to do? How do you stay passionate about your sport?
I just liked doing things with my friends, I guess, for my motivation, like doing it because I always did team sports like cheerleading, and just being there for my team, because if I didn't go, then like it'd be a huge impact on like the team. So others kind of kept me motivated.
Yeah, and that translates really well. Thank you for that answer, Mallory. That translates really well to work too, right? Like I remember for me that is a huge motivator, is feeling like my team is relying on me, and like feeling like if I don't show up, to the work that day, people are going to notice, right? Like that's really motivating for me as well. And then thirdly, I just threw up here curiosity, like staying curious about what you're doing. I don't know about y'all, but like I have worked a number of jobs where like I start off really passionate and then I just get bored, right? Because I feel like I've learned everything there is to know. And it might happen too quickly, right? Like you might only be at a job for like 6 months and you already feel bored. How do you kind of 6 months is probably too early to be leaving the job, right? You kind of want a year at least for your resume. Usually like 2 years is even better. Mostly because employers will notice if you're jumping from job to job too often. But you're really bored, you're not going to put out your best work. How do you stay curious? For me, it's helpful to step back and ask questions about the industry as a whole, right? Like maybe what you're doing is just this really small piece of the puzzle, but like maybe you want to be like reading about, you know, the real estate industry or about the legal industry or computer programming, whatever you're in, right? Like whatever you're doing, kind of try to stay curious about some aspect of that. And that can help you maintain passion, like your passion for your work over the course of your job. Does anyone else have any other thoughts on how they stay motivated? It's hard to be motivated on Monday night, I understand. All right, let's move on to the next one. Working smart. So this is my favorite one, mostly because for me, this have sort of been a breakthrough in the past several years. I've always been the type of person to just sort of, and I still am to some extent, the type of person who just wants to like, the negative way of putting it would be controlling, right? Like I just want to like take it and do it myself, but it's mostly because I don't want to have to ask someone for help, right? Like I just want to handle things and feel like I'm being helpful to other people. This is another big, actually, Tim Ferriss concept is like, what can you delegate off of your plate, right? Whether it be at work, whether it be at home. I mean, the whole reason, I don't know if y'all have ever read The 4-Hour Work Week, but the reason that he can supposedly work 4 hours a week is that he has other people doing most of the work, right? Like, so this is something you can actually do in, you know, a normal job is you can make sure that you're delegating the things that you're not best situated to do, right? Sometimes it's going to be you're asking teammates to handle some stuff. And that's like sort of a tricky thing because you don't, and you have to work with your, you know, whoever you're reporting to be able to make that happen. Because you don't, yeah, obviously you don't want to look like you're just like shirking your work or shirking your duties. But you can like ask team members for help who are better situated to handle particular things, right? So say somebody comes to your department or comes to you particularly with a request for information about something you know nothing about. You know that someone else on your team knows way more about that. You could either like take a ton of time to try and like build the knowledge that other person already has, or you could just go to that person, right? Just send that request to that person, be like, hey, I thought you were better suited to handle this because I know you're really up to speed on this stuff, right? And that can be like a hard thing to do if you're trying to, like, if you're new to a job and you're trying to impress the boss or whatever. Like there's often this pressure to make decisions that aren't the most efficient decisions because you're trying to impress someone. And that is a choice. Like maybe it makes sense to just do the work in that instance, or maybe you're really trying to learn about that particular topic and so it's worth the time for you to do it. But just know that you have that choice. You have that choice to delegate it off of your plate. And the more things that you delegate off of your plate, the more time you have to focus on the things that really do matter. And that's sort of the second point here is let the unimportant stuff go, right? Like let it slide. You need to focus on the things that you're going to get the biggest return out of. I think the Tim Ferriss quote is something like 90% of your effort should go into what will give you 90% of the return. Again, there's a big school work-life difference here, where in school, I think everything to some extent is sort of equal importance. Like you have to do your homework, you have to take the test, you have to do the project, right? Obviously they're grade, you know, they're weighted differently in terms of grade, but you have to do it all. In most jobs these days, there's just, as a matter of course, going to be more on your plate than you can actually get done. And people talk about prioritizing things, but really another way of saying prioritize is basically know that you're going to have to not do some stuff because you can't do everything. And that might mean you don't go to a certain meeting, or you don't read a certain email, right? And you have to be able to explain coherently to anyone that you're reporting to why you're making those choices. But if you're able to do that, if you're able to make choices to say, I chose not to do that thing because this other thing was more important, I guarantee it will actually impress the people that you're reporting to. It will not make them think that you're not doing your job. It will make them think that you're, truly being very thoughtful about your work. And you're just acknowledging the reality that just the way the modern economy works, everybody is given more work than they can do. And then I'm gonna, like, that third point, protect your time, sort of lines up with these other points, right? Like, make sure that you block off time on your calendar where no one can make a meeting, right? Because the meetings are the notorious time suckers, right? Where you're not actually getting anything done, but you're stuck sitting there in the meeting. Don't let other departments, this is another large organization thing, but don't let other departments ask you to do their work for them. So like a really good example of this is, so in legal, we're like, relatively highly paid compared to other departments to do work that other people can't do, right? We do like legal analysis, risk analysis, drafting language for contracts, right? We're supposed to be spending most of our time doing that. But there will sometimes be a situation where another department sends us, I don't know, perhaps a contract where like the formatting is really messed up and they didn't convert it properly from like a PDF to a Word document so that we could edit it. And they're saying like, just deal with it. Well, the answer is no. Like, I have other things to focus on that are more important, and ultimately someone else is just going to have to figure out the formatting for that document. Does that make me a jerk? I don't know. Maybe some people will say so, but I think it's actually a better use of the company's resources to make sure that the lawyers are doing legal work, right? And again, this is another situation where if you're new to a company, you're going to feel, potentially, depending on your personality, a lot of pressure to just sort of take it on and do it. But try to step back and make those choices, right? Try to say, no, that's something someone else should handle. As long as you can do so politely, and again, make a coherent argument for why that makes sense. It's actually setting boundaries like that earns you a lot of respect. So I have sort of like a practice question. Fun times. So the context here is, let's see, did I make it legal? I think I did. Yeah. Okay, you're a lawyer. You're an unnamed lawyer in an unnamed legal department. And you have a choice about how to spend your afternoon. One, you have a really big piece of an internal workflow process that you're supposed to be developing, that the head of your department entrusted to you specifically. They were like, Mallory, you need to design this part of the workflow process, or Sophia, you need to design this part of the workflow process. Sorry, I am accidentally. You also have the option to attend an organization-wide training, and that training is actually going to be led by your direct supervisor. So your supervisor is going to know whether or not you went, and they might ask you questions about it. And then the third thing is completing the review of a renewal contract for a key vendor at your organization. So looking at these options, thinking of those principles of delegating, protecting your time, and putting most of your effort where it matters and where you get the most returns. What are y'all's initial thoughts on which of these things is most important? And you can also ask questions. If there's something else you want to know about any of these options, throw those questions out.
I would say that me personally, I would do the big piece of an internal workflow process. I think because that would like make me check off a task on my task list, and that internally like motivates me and that completes me, just checking off stuff. And then like attending an organization wide training, to me that would seem, or it would be fun to go, but I could also just get it straight from my supervisor as well.
Yeah, that's a good thought. That's a good thought. Any other initial thoughts?
I think I would probably ask, like, in terms of the internal workflow, is there someone better able that has like expertise in that area to help with it? Because that way I can like give time to other things as well. But I agree with the other person said that with the conference, it's like I can just get that information from my supervisor and like communicate that like I'm overbooked right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Nice. Okay, so let me add a couple of things. So the internal workflow process is a long-term project. The next sort of point on that project is there's a meeting to discuss progress on it in like 3 or 4 days. So they're going to want to know where you're at with that. But it is a longer term project. The organization-wide training is on goal setting and completing the review of the renewal contract. It is a key vendor, so it's a really important contract, and it's a high dollar value. So it's like, let's say an $850,000 contract. Does that change anyone's answer? Or does anyone have a thought? Okay, here's my thought. And this is not, there's no right or wrong, right? This is just to think through, because this is a, like I said, an unnamed attorney's situation, right? Like this stuff happens, like this kind of question happens in work life. You can't do everything, you've got to make decisions. So for me, the most important thing is actually number 3. My job at the organization is to be an attorney. We have a contract for renewal that is very, very high dollar value. It's a key vendor. It matters what the terms of that contract are. It's also usually, this is more context you maybe more have as an attorney, but usually people are in a hurry to get their contracts done, right? But anyway, regardless of that, that's my number 1 thing. I think I totally agree with, I think it was Priscilla said you could just get the information straight from your supervisor as opposed to going to this training. The counterweight to that is some people are going to feel pressured to go to the training because their supervisor is leading it, and the supervisor is going to be like, hey, why didn't you go to my training, right? But I totally agree. That of these 3 is by far the least important. What you could do, like with that concept of delegating, is you could ask someone who's attending to like send you the notes or something, right? And you can actually, what you really should do is you should email someone who's going, ask them to send you the notes and CC your supervisor so that the supervisor knows that you're taking steps to get the information, but also protecting your time. That would be the really clever move. And then the big important piece of the internal workflow process, because it's a long-term project, you can get away with doing a little less for now. That doesn't mean like you shouldn't try, right? But you have a check-in meeting in a couple of days. So all you really need to do is make progress, maybe make smart progress, right? Like maybe get a poll together about, like, it depends on what this workflow process is, right? But say it's something that involves other departments, maybe get some input from other departments on what they're wanting to see, right? And be able to present that at the meeting. But you just need to show that you're working on it and that you're working smart on it. You don't need to actually finish the project. It's something that could only take like 5 minutes of your time, and it's going to make you look really good, and it's going to actually advance the project a lot too, to just ask some good questions. So that would be my approach. Spend most of the time on the renewal contract, skip the meeting, get the notes, and at least make some progress on the workflow project. Does anybody have any thoughts or questions about that before I move on to the networking as second nature idea? No? Okay. I'm such a nerd about work, guys. I like sort of love this type of thing. Okay. Networking. So how many people here dislike the term networking? Yeah. I see a couple hands. Most people do. I think it feels very transactional, I think, right? Like you're out to like get stuff from people or something. So let me free you from that concept of networking. As someone who has done a lot of networking and continues to do a lot of networking, this is the way you should think about it. Networking is no more and no less than cultivating curiosity and empathy toward people in your life and being eager to use what you have to improve their lives. That's all networking is. The people that stick in your mind that you have met are people who have been interested in you, who have been asking questions about you and who have been offering to help you, right? In real substantive ways, right? In a meaningful way. You don't want to be fake about it. If you don't have anything to offer, don't offer it, right? But the fact is, you probably do have something to offer. And if you don't, that's something to be working on, right? And it doesn't need to be like, I don't know, you don't have to have a job to give them, right? It could be a book recommendation, right? But you want to be building up the resources that you have to offer other people. That kind of fits in with this like curiosity idea, like being engaged with the world, right? Like you want to be able to like recommend things like, oh, I just saw this awesome play that you should go see, right? Or you want to be able to like weigh in and like offer something into people's lives. Might be small things, might be big things, but that's really what networking is. And the reason I put the little circle there is, as you can imagine, it sort of comes back to you, right? Like when you're giving to people, they think of you and they want to give it back. And that's, you're not doing it for the getting back. It's just, it feels good to give too. So that's really the thought about networking. Obviously, entrepreneurs, people who are founders, networking is vital. You're going to get a lot of your investors through networks and through secondary networks. You're going to get people who are promoting the product. You're going to get users. You're going to get a lot of your test, like your groups that you first test your product with are going to be through networking, right? It's just people you know and people who know the people you know, right? I would also say that networking internally at an organization that you work for is really truly career work. It's not just socializing. I actually, some of my first clients when I started my own firm, or when I joined my husband Alex's firm, some of my first clients were actually coworkers from some previous jobs, right? You just never know how those relationships are going to play out over your life. And like in the meantime, it's just nice, right, to like cultivate those connections. Also, having those relationships, like especially across departments in a big organization, can really grease the wheels when it comes to like designing and implementing processes, resolving problems. Like if you have a relationship with someone, it's a lot easier to, call them up or Zoom, start a Zoom call or a Teams meeting and get to the heart of the issue, as opposed to just sending all of these big emails like that have a ton of people on the chain and aren't really resolving anything and maybe are muddying the waters a bit. So this is like less of a practice thing and more of just a thought exercise, but this is like, I'm talking about like this level of interaction, right? Like a coworker mentions that her band is playing on Friday. Maybe you can go see it, right? Maybe you have friends coming to town and you can bring them to see the band. Maybe the coworker tells you that she's feeling overwhelmed at work. What can you offer? What can you do to try and help? Right? Maybe it's a book recommendation. Maybe it's just, hey, let's go get a drink like after work. Or she's trying to think of a gift to get her boyfriend. What's a gift that you gave recently that was a big hit, or something you saw that was really cool, right? Like thinking in this way, it's not, I know it seems like, I don't know, strategic or something, but like really it just makes for better conversations and relationships generally. Like always try to be thinking about what you can offer. Because it's just going to make life better for everyone. And again, that's what I believe the heart of networking really is generosity to the extent that you can give it. Okay, so that's like, just that first part was kind of, habits, founder habits that kind of can play out in the workplace and how they can play out. The second point that I want to make is just talking about what it looks like to create something of your own within a large organization. I think, obviously that's part of what really makes someone an entrepreneur, like other than deciding to be your own boss, which is, another thing that you can kind of do inside of an organization as well. But other than that, it's creating something. I think the first term that somebody tossed out when we were talking about founders was this idea of creativity. And you can do that when you're working for someone else, just as easily, really, I think, as if you're starting a company. So I pulled like I'm not a product development person. I'm someone who advises product development people, totally different, but on legal issues. So this is not by any means, like Sydney could tell you way more about product development than I can tell you. But they're just some general concepts that are at play when, as a startup founder, you are trying to work on product market fit and like making sure that whatever you're producing is actually something that people are going to want. The big first thing is know your customer, know who it is that you're trying to sell to, right? The second thing is build credibility, build your brand, like make sure people trust you so that they want to buy your product. Third, you want to gather advisors, people who again know the market, can kind of help like add value to your product. And then quantifying the value. Really here, usually what they're talking about is being able to demonstrate to potential investors where the market is and where the potential returns are. So I kind of took that framework and tried to apply it in a situation where you're in a company trying to figure out what to do. So again, I apologize, this is like sort of legal specific, but that's just where my mind went. Say you're working somewhere and you notice that a lot of the contracts are expired. It seems like contracts aren't getting renewed quickly enough. And so what ends up happening is that you're still in this relationship with a vendor, but the contract terms aren't applying, which means that there's a ton more legal liability for both parties. It's not really in anyone's interest that the contract expires, but clearly there's some kind of like process gap here where contracts are like not getting flagged when they're up for renewal. Now, the team that you have to work with to fix this problem is not the legal team, because they're not the ones sending contracts along and liaising with outside parties. It's maybe your product team. Maybe they're the ones who are entering contracts with like consultants and other vendors with whom there are all these expired contracts. One question to ask yourself is, does the product team care about the same stuff that I care about, right? Like in the legal department, maybe we're all like, running around like our hair is on fire because we have all these expired contracts. But does the product team care that much about expired contracts? Like, probably not. What do they care about? Like, if you're the person who's trying to get contracts through so that you can get work done and meet your own goals, what do you probably care about when it comes to contracts? Any thoughts? I mentioned it early on, speed. You just want them done. Nobody wants to be in an extended contract. That's why everyone hates the legal department, because everything gets stuck in the legal department, and legal is worried about, this particular word that they used in the fourth to last sentence of the second to last paragraph. And who really cares, right? And nobody does until you're in litigation and the judge cares. But that's neither here nor there. Right now, in this moment, the product team does not care whether contracts are expired. From their perspective, nothing has gone wrong. The vendors are, still working with them just fine. Like, it's just this abstract issue. So if you want to make any change, if you want to make a process that's going to fix this expired contracts issue, and you want that process to actually be followed by people on the product team, what you really have to do is design a process that addresses what they care about, while maybe also addressing what you care about. So you design a workflow that's going to address both speed of contract turnaround and address that gap where contracts that are up for renewal are not kind of coming to the surface. And then when you develop, this is like the sort of the last thing, quantifying the value of that is necessary just basically to sell it to people who are the decision makers, right? You want to be able to quantify, okay, here's like depending on your project, it'll be different, right? But for this particular project, it might be, oh, I want to, because I'm going to fill this gap, there's such and such like thousands of dollars at issue, right? If we ended up being sued, or if something ended up going wrong under one of these expired vendor contracts, this would resolve that issue. Yeah, that basically you have to be able to sell your idea, right? Now, this slide looks super confusing, so I will explain it. But the idea here is that the things that we talked about earlier, they kind of lend themselves to this process, right? Like if you're really passionate and you're bringing passion to what you do at your organization, you're going to be asking questions. You're going to be talking to people about their experience at the company. You're going to be listening to what they have to say. You're going to be observing things, and probably you're going to know your customer, your internal customer really well. You're going to know your organization really well. Also, the networking is going to help you not only not only with like knowing the organization really well, and in fact, I do think that's sort of number one, but secondly, it's going to help you build credibility and get buy-in for anything that you do develop or any problem that you're trying to solve. You're going to have a lot of people on your side because, you know, that coworker whose band you went to see play on Friday remembers that you went and saw her band play on Friday, right? And that's like a human thing. Like she cares about that. She cares about you. She knows you care about her. And so when you come to her with this new idea, she's gonna be like, hey, that's awesome. Like I'm gonna tell the rest of my team that I'm totally on board with that. And that's going to make a huge difference when it comes time to implement. Because especially when you're doing something cross-departmentally, where you don't actually have like sort of hierarchical authority over the people that you're trying to sell something on, it's very, very hard to get universal implementation. And then finally, quantifying value. It's really what I just talked about, making sure that you can build a case for this new product, right, for your supervisor. Let's see. So yeah, so that's my thought there. You know, you can definitely develop something internally and basically apply the same principles that you would apply as an entrepreneur in your role at work. This is the part that I just wanted to touch on briefly as well. So a lot of what we've been talking about is taking initiative, right? It's basically assigning yourself more work. So you've got some things that someone has told you to do, and then you're also trying to spot process gaps and develop things and get buy-in. And it's a lot of work, right? To like care that much about your job. And I just want to take a minute, especially as someone who recently had a child, to say that like, that's not always what you want to be doing with your job, right? Like maybe you want to apply these principles, you know, in a volunteer role that you serve outside of work, or maybe you're applying these principles in your family life, or it's not always going to be work, and that's okay. And it might be seasonal, right? Like maybe, you know, when you're first out of college, you are investing most of your time into your job, and you're going to be an internal entrepreneur, right? You're going to be really putting a lot of effort into making improvements at your company. But there might be other phases of life where you're kind of just clocking in and out, and you're still doing a good job, but you're just not doing anything more than is expected of you. And that's okay too. Like, even like, I just want to like give everyone the freedom to know that like, that is it, you are not required to care this much about your job. If you do care this much about your job and you're trying to sort of excel internally, or you're trying to build some of those skills because you do plan on starting a company in the near future, by all means, full speed ahead. But any amount of this is good, you know, or if you need to take the time to focus on other things, that's good too. Make sure that you have your priorities straight. You know, work is not going to love you back. So just know that if you're in a way, even when you are working for someone else, you're really working for yourself. You want to make sure that what you're getting out of the organization is what you actually want. So you better be learning something or developing something, or, you know, even if it's just getting paid, that's fine too. But just make sure you have those boundaries in place, because you can be fulfilled, I think, by creating things and putting stuff out into the world and improving it, but you're never going to be fulfilled solely by excelling at work. And just keep that in mind. I think that's actually all I have. Maybe I made too short a presentation, but we can jump into questions and comments if anybody wants to throw something out there. Let me actually ask how many of y'all are seniors, if any? Nobody. Who's a junior? Do like a thumbs up if you're a junior. Okay, Isla, if I'm pronouncing that right. Any sophomores? Priscilla, Kayla, sorry, it's probably Kayla, right? Not Kyla. Okay, and then freshmen. Sophia and Mallory. Okay. Yeah. So sort of earlier on in the college career, do you guys know yet what you want to do post-graduation? I see, Isabella, that you're a senior. You're closer to the work stuff. It's coming for you. But yeah, how many of y'all know what you want to do after you graduate? Feel free to just, you don't have to do a thumbs up. You can just talk.
I have no idea. I have things like scrambled in my head, but I know I want to live in a big city. That's all I know.
Are you from a small town?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. That makes sense. I know a lot of people end up wanting to do the opposite of whatever they had before. And then ironically, it's usually full circle. Like often people then end up moving to a small town when they're older.
Yeah.
But totally makes sense. Do you know what big city?
I mean, I feel like everyone wants to go to New York, but I don't know if I would want to like live there forever. I kind of want to just travel around and see what happens.
Cool. Yeah, that's a great goal. I love that. It's a good goal to have early on in your career too, because I think you don't really know, as much as you might have an idea of what you want to do, like it's hard to really know until you've actually done something, right? There's a lot of like, oh, I liked this about this job, but I didn't like this. Like now let me shift slightly and find something new. Anybody else have an idea of what they want to do?
I'm going to be doing consulting after I graduate, which is exciting. And it's like what Priscilla schools are like. I just wanted to travel around. And like I like the idea of consulting. So yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, consulting is great for that, for travel, especially when you're a little bit more unattached and you're younger. It's also really good for just getting like a bird's eye view of like what a lot of different businesses are going through, because then you can kind of, I mean, I didn't do consulting myself, but I have a lot of friends who went into consulting. I actually have one who's still, so consulting is very often like a place you start and then you kind of end up like going into like private equity, or you go to like a company internally. But I have one friend who's still at I want to say PwC maybe, but she's been there since we graduated in 2013. So it can be your kind of like true career as well if you really take to it. Yeah. Anybody have any questions or comments or anything they want to add? If not, we can totally wrap up too. Just wanted to give y'all space.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
Like, what is something we could do now to start networking or like research? Like, what is something we could start now before we enter the workforce that you recommend?
Yeah. So I think being a student is like a superpower when it comes to opening doors, because people, as long as you're not like flat out like asking for a job, which is like really off-putting for people, people love talking to students. Like I think everyone sort of remembers being a student and like how awesome it is, and we're all jealous of you, and we like to relive our glory days by talking to students. So if you, I mean, especially if you can like start thinking about like what you're interested in, like what questions you have about different jobs or roles, or even like if you're interested in policy, like the world is your oyster, right? Like this is the time for you to like reach out to people and ask questions. And that could be, you know, you go to a talk and somebody leaves their, you know, provides their email information or whatever. Shoot them an email and introduce yourself and ask a question, right? And maybe they'll be open to a phone call. That's actually honestly like probably the best first step for anything, because when you introduce yourself as a student, you like, I swear you just like trigger something in people's brains and they like want to help you. Or they want to like, yeah, they want to help you think through things, and they're really impressed by your initiative. Like you are such a gung-ho student, you know? So that would be something, is if you are interested in like, even if you're just interested in a particular person, like maybe you, I don't know, yeah, you read an article about like a UT alum in like one of those alumni magazines that I never actually opened. You really are fascinated by like the life of this particular person. If you have, if you can find a way, actually, I think UT might have I'm trying to think of like how you get their contact information. Like there's probably a way, like that's another fun thing. It's just trying to like find people's contact information. But basically, if you can get someone's contact info, just reach out, introduce yourself as a student, ask a question, ask for a phone call. Yeah, that's like my first thought. Yeah, I think honestly, like I think it is just about talking to people, introducing yourself to people, trying to get out there and see things. And yeah, sorry, I don't have anything more specific than that, but yeah.
I have something to add on to that. Some of the best advice that I got when I was a student and then an intern was it's not necessarily about who you know, it's about who knows you. So I think that's a big point too. And I was like, as you're networking, like it's important to like get your name out there. So like you're meeting all these people, but the more people who know who you are, the more people who can like be advocate for you and help, bring your name up in rooms that you couldn't get into. Or if, they have open positions, they can be like, oh, I actually met someone who might be good for this and put your name forward for it. So that's an interesting point that was helpful for me.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think what's a little intimidating, at least for me, about that advice when I was like in college, like, is that I think I had a hard time knowing like what I really had to offer. Like, why should someone remember me? Like I'm a student, like I don't have anything to offer. And that's why I think at that stage of life, it's often easier to be more of a question asker. And then like what you have is your interest, right? What you have is your passion, right? For lack of a better word. But yeah, to the extent that you can get people to remember you and know you, like that's important for sure. Anything else? Thank you guys again for being here. Like I said, on a Monday night, try to stay strong this week, stay motivated, hit those forehands with discipline, but also with passion. And yeah, I guess that's a wrap for the evening. Also, I'll just put my contact info in the chat in case y'all have things. Oh my gosh, let's see. Should I do my professional email? Life is so confusing now with the professional and the personal. It's like very meshed. I will give you my professional one just for fun. Okay, so that's Maggie at Promise ATX. That's my my law firm, Promise Legal. You can reach out to me there if you would like to connect. And yeah, you guys are in such a yeah, Mallory, please go ahead. No, yeah, we have a couple more minutes. It's fine.
I don't know who would know the answer, but I'm in the process of applying for the Kendra Scott sponsored courses. I'm just unsure if I can apply to more than one, or if since I'm a freshman, I don't know if there's an entry course I should probably take rather than another one. I just was wondering that.
I don't know the answer to that. Catherine, do you know?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm so excited you're applying to the courses. They're all amazing. And I am so jealous that I did not get to take these courses when I was in school. But I think you're allowed to apply to as many as you want. In terms of like an entry-level course, there's not an official one, but the entrepreneurial leadership is kind of the unofficial course that I would recommend taking before all the other ones to kind of like ease your way into the KSWLE courses, but definitely apply to any and all that you're interested in.
Yeah, you guys have an incredible resource in these courses. I am equally jealous that I did not have something comparable. All right, y'all. I'm gonna go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you all for coming out. I don't know if Catherine, you needed, or Priscilla, y'all wanted to add anything else before we close? No? All good? Okay. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night. Bye.